thank you all again, for joining me. Thank you. Like we said, this is the second strategy session that we are having. And at this moment, I'm going to hand it over to our very own Pastor John Namaka to give us a brief review of what we have done so far. Thank you. Over to you, sir. You're on mute.
All right. Okay. Good evening, everybody. I trust we're good. I trust we're fine. So I want to say a very special welcome to everyone that has taken out time to be here this evening or this afternoon, wherever it is that you are in the part of the world. Very quickly, I just want to give a very quick recap to those that were not here last week. I shouldn't take more than 3 minutes to so do. One of the major things that we learned last week was that the system the world operates in right now is one that calls for an inward looking, no longer we just focusing on natural resources and all these things that make us think that we have some form of wealth, when in the real sense the world is moving past it. And it requires for careful and introspection and careful planning. And that's the idea behind what it is that we're doing. It's by no error that it is called a strategy session, because we are going to be talking about strategic things that we can begin immediately to do, not just as a whole country, but as an individual and then collectively as a people. So I want you to maintain a very open heart and open mind. For those of us that were here last week, we can all testify to the quality of the information that came to us. We have a very seasoned speaker who is going to be taking us in very profound lines of thoughts. So I want us to keep our minds open, keep our hearts open, and I'm sure that the next few minutes that we are going to be spending here will be the most productive yet in your day. So I want you to just prepare your heart and prepare your mind, get your environment free of distractions. You might want to put your phone on mute. You want to turn off those notifications. You want to get yourself a pen, a paper, or a notepad, or your tablet, or your machine, whatever you use to take note. It's important that you take note and be sure to be following. If you've got questions, you keep them. There's going to be a question and answer session at the end of the keynote address. So I just want you to keep your questions also to that time, and I'm sure that we're going to do justice to them. So once again, I want to say a very huge thank you to everyone that's made out the time to be with us this evening. Thank you very much. And I would hand over back to our moderator. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the review. Thank you. So at this point, we're just going to go to our guest speaker. I know most of us are really excited after all that we learned last week. I know we're super pumped up and excited to hear what he has to share today. So for the sake of those, I see a few people that were not here last week. I'm just briefly going to run through the bio of our speaker so that you have an idea of who our speaker really is. So our speaker is Mr. Anigbogu. He's a PhD student of micro and nanoscale system engineering in Louisiana Tech University, USA. He's a graduate of electrical engineering from the Federal University of Technology, Owerri, with relevant work experiences as a field support engineer with IHS Tour. So he was a graduate intern with the Federal Capital Development Authority, Abuja, and a former intern of Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria. So he's very passionate about understanding and engaging people on the meeting points of human capital development, social development, and history. So Winner has spent years studying how functional systems are formed and why systems fail. So he's a really amazing guest speaker, and today is going to be talking about building a knowledge-based economy. Truly, I'm excited. I don't know about you. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Winner Anigbogu. Over to you, sir.
All right, thank you so much, French and John. Thank you, everyone available, for having me today. I will be talking about a knowledge-based economy. Can you all hear me, please? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I'll be talking about a knowledge-based economy today. Last week, I spent a good deal of time trying to debunk a mindset that we have as a nation. We think our wealth is in our mineral resources, or particularly crude oil. And I went through a couple of research done in Harvard and so many places, showing that, in fact, those nations with the most natural resources are actually at the risk of more political instability, extinction, so many other things, and then they're getting poorer and poorer, and will keep getting poorer by the day. And the statistics are there to prove it. Many of such nations are poorer now than they were 20 years ago. And that's not just Nigeria, but Saudi Arabia and many other major countries that have an economy that is built on just mineral resources or natural resources. And I told us that by today, I'll be majoring on building a knowledge-based economy, a more sustainable economy, a stable economy, what I termed a knowledge-based economy. So thank you once more, and I just follow me on just, it's a very little journey within the next couple of minutes. I think I have just 30 minutes. So yeah, basically, by definition, I would say that a knowledge-based economy is primarily an economy that is wholly driven by innovation and entrepreneurial spirit of the people. And take note of the use of the word the people, not government, but the people, by the innovation and the entrepreneurial spirit of the people. Now, it's an economy that has the people as their greatest asset, not natural resources. And when you see a knowledge-based economy, you will know by the direction of the government policies. I will give you an example. In Nigeria, for example, in Nigeria now, ASU has been on strike for how long? It's getting to 6 months, and the country is moving on as if nothing is happening. When I talk about ASU, I'm talking about a huge population of the youths in Nigeria, the future of the nation, the knowledge base, the institution that is heaped, that the responsibility of education of the nation is heaped upon them, is down for the past how many months, and it's as if everything is okay. Just make a mistake to point a finger at the oil wells in Nigeria, and you'll be surprised. All the military tanks in the barracks will be let loose on you. So it tells you something about the direction of focus of the government. So Nigeria as a nation has never, until now, they are not still operating as a knowledge-based economy. So basically, a knowledge-based economy, like I defined, is an economy that is wholly driven by the innovation and the entrepreneurial spirit of the people. It is a people-focused economy. A knowledge-based economy believes that educating the people is the direct and the most superior way of creating an economy as a result of the innovation of the people. Educated minds will always build better economies, they will build better industries, they will build better service systems. Now, having said that, I will also add this. In a knowledge-based economy, the government has only one role, one major role. I would collect all their roles and put them together in one, which is simply creating a conducive environment for the people to thrive. The government has very minimal influence over production. The government has almost no, the government don't engage in much activities that have to do with production directly. The job of the government is just laws and regulations to ensure stability, political stability, social stability, so that the people can thrive. So they create a kind of atmosphere that makes for wholesome competition and the training of the people that will directly drive the economy. So the success of this kind of economy is proportional to the mental development of the people. So in societies that have far higher quality of science education and business education, education amongst the people across board, they stand a far better chance of creating a successful people-oriented economies. And I'll prove these things with statistics. And on the other hand, I would also like to say this, a knowledge-based economy, aside being driven by the people, the growth of the economy is primarily based on, number one, service-based activities, which I will explain later, and then finished products. I think recently, El Rufai, the governor of Kaduna State, says something that I find quite striking. He said that Nigeria needs to find a way to move from the agrarian economy into ICT and digital and service-oriented economies. And in his words, the digital technology is the way Africa can preserve its growth and continue to lift people out of poverty. He said we must invest in the digital. These were the words of El Rufai. What he said is actually true. The only problem I have with it is when you read the article fully, when they're talking about investing in digital economy, they're talking about the government investment. They're talking about the government pulling these companies, the government ownership of many of these things. And that is where they're getting it wrong. They do not understand the responsibility of the government in the 21st century. The government has no business really with means of production. The government should be focused solely on laws and creating a stable environment, and then investment in the people that will in turn drive the economy. So had he said, okay, why don't we invest heavily on Nigerians, particularly through education and building of infrastructure, so that when the minds of the people grow, the economy will directly grow. So to build a digital economy, all you actually need is a people that have the right kind of mindset, the right kind of education to foster the growth of these industries that they're talking about, not necessarily the government. If you look around the world, the most unstable nations you have today globally are nations that their governments are directly involved in the means of production and the markets. And you find out in most African nations. Go to Nigeria, Cameroon, there is this Kenya, many of these African nations, you find out that the government is directly involved in the ownership of means of production. And that nothing creates more political instability in the 21st century than it. It leads to the fight and the struggle for governance. When the means of production is in the hands of the people and the government simply regulates, the struggle for the hem of affairs would drastically reduce, because your improvement, your survival will be dependent on you and not on the government. So that being said, like I said earlier, the proof of the direction of focus of Nigerian government, it's in something as little as ASU strike. And it has been on for months. Everywhere is just the way it is. It's as if nothing is happening. The government is moving on as usual. So it tells you something about the focus of our government. And so long as we keep moving in this direction, we are not going to make any headway. So we need a kind of U-turn on our thinking about the economy, on our thinking about governance. And I hear a lot of people talking about restructuring in Nigeria. And unfortunately, many people, when you talk about restructuring, the first question you get from people is what happens to crude oil, what happens to this, what happens to that. I will also show you that the most successful economies we have currently in the 21st century have next to no mineral resources. That's solely driven by what I'm describing as excuse me, there's a train passing, so the noise it might disturb a bit for a few seconds. So having said that, I would like to describe some very few economic terms before I delve deep into more detailed explanation of what I mean. So I will talk about what is known as gross domestic product. I will not assume that everyone knows what that is. And now, gross domestic product is basically the overall market value of all the finished goods and services produced within a country at a given time. It's an estimate of a country's productivity. So take note of the word finished goods and services. Now, there are so many factors that are considered in calculating the GDP of a nation. And you talk about the consumer spending, the government spending, the business capital spending. And the fourth one, which I'm more concerned about, is the net, what is called foreign balance of trade, the net export and import balance. Now, I will explain what that means. It's a kind of, if you subtract what the country produces, their net exports from their imports, you either get what is called a trade surplus or trade deficit. So a country that imports more than they export will have what is called in economics trade deficits. And a country that exports more than they import would have a trade surplus. And amongst all the factors that influence GDP, this is the most important factor, the foreign balance of trade. And this is the most important factor that is also plaguing African nations, the balance between export and import. Now, in my definition of GDP, which you can read up that later, I said it's the overall market value of all finished products. And the implication is this: even in your exports, it's not enough just to export goods. It's very important the goods you are exporting. Are you exporting raw materials? Are you exporting finished products? Are you exporting raw materials? Are you exporting finished products? If you noticed, you'll find out, if you've taken some time to study the trend in African nations, you will discover that most African nations, the exports they're doing, if any, are all raw materials, crude oil, agriculture. From my research, I gathered that Nigeria for some time has been the highest producers of cassava and yam. And to an extent, we are doing quite well in farming potatoes and so many other things. But we export these things as raw materials. And I will tell you something, the value in goods is not actually in raw materials. The value in goods is in the finished product. So the implication is this: Nigeria would plant potatoes, harvest the potatoes, and export the raw materials to many other nations, and then use the money they made from that raw materials to import products that we are getting from that same raw material they sold, the finished products. Now, the difference in economies between the raw material and the finished product is what is called value added. And that is where the real deal is. By God's grace, I'm studying nanotechnology and all these microchips, micro and nanoscale systems, basically. I will surprise us. In order to buttress my point, I will like to surprise us with this detail. Do you know that the microchip that you use, that is used in manufacturing of most of these phones and many of these things, what is called the wafer, the bedrock of all integrated circuits and everything, is gotten from sand? Like sand, the sand, the sand that is everywhere all over, in every country of Africa, virtually everywhere, sand. Now that sand is worthless, just being like that. But by the time you move sand from being sand to wafer, you actually make over 100% profit from the investment in production. So converting sand from wafer, converting from sand to wafer, that gap between the raw material and the finished product is actually where the money is. And we have all these things all around us, and they're all lying dormant. Nothing is happening. But another thing you need to remember is this: Moving from sand to the wafer and then IC fabrication takes technology and knowledge. And that is where the level of awareness, the quality of education that a nation has plays a very key role in driving these industries. So that is what I wanted to cite this example. A bag of potato is a raw material harvested from farm. By the time you sell a bag of potato, if what you got from it is, let me assume $10, that same bag of potato, by the time it is refined and converted into mashed potatoes and other byproducts of potato, that single bag of potato, you might get over $2,000 from it. In fact, the most profitable industries in the world is actually electronics industry. That's what I'm finding out from my course of study. It is so profitable because of the profit margin they gain from conversion from raw materials to finished product. It is so wide. So when you hear that companies like Apple and Samsung are making a lot of money, it's understandable to me now. So finished products. And Africa is lagging behind in regards to finished product because of the level, two things, the level of education back home, and then the attention and the direction of our governance. These two things, the level of education back home, and then the attention and direction of our governance. I'll also define something before I go into more details. There's something called GDP per capita. I don't know why I decided to just break these things down. It's GDP per capita is a way of estimating the level of productivity of a single individual in a country, and is also used to estimate the standard of living in nations. And there are so many factors that come into play. If you just want to explain it in a plain language, it's the GDP divided by the population of the country. So it's like saying, what is the worth of productivity of a single individual in a single nation, in a particular nation at a particular time, excuse me, and you use it to estimate the standard of living of that nation. Having said that, let me progress to something. Now, there are so many factors that aid the success of knowledge-based economies. I'm trying to speed up some things so that I can then enter into details. Number one major factor is education. Education. Now, the quality of education in a nation, like I said, is directly proportional to the economic growth of that nation. A nation that takes education seriously is a nation that will grow economically. Because the kind of minds, the quality of minds you have in your nation are actually the things, it's actually the major thing that will drive what I termed a knowledge-based economy. These industries are driven by the level of scientific knowledge you have in the nation and the level of business awareness you have in the nation. You might find it hard to believe, but find out from an average Nigerian graduate what GDP means. Something as little as GDP. What you will find will surprise you. Now, last week, we spent a good deal of time talking about Singapore. What happened in Singapore between 1965 to 2000. How Singapore metamorphosed into the giant it is today in the world. And we laid a lot of foundations that helped us understand what happened in Singapore. Now, I want to show you a correlation between education and the transformation that took place in Singapore. After Singapore was rejected by Malaysia in 1965, Lee Kuan Yew, their then prime minister, decided that the only natural resource, the natural resources Singapore has, or we are left with then, were their people. They termed their people their own natural resources. So education became a national investment in Singapore. And what was the result of this national investment? to show you, there are indices of measuring this. By 1997, there's a body called the Third International Mathematics and Science Study, TIMSS. So they compared the average scores of 13-year-olds in mathematics and science tests across 41 countries, including United States and many countries. Third International Mathematics and Science Study, you can Google these things, TIMSS. They compared the scores of 13-year-olds to show the quality of education every nation is receiving across 41 countries. By 1997, Singapore ranked first in both mathematics and science literacy, with scores of, they had mathematics and science literacy, I think Singapore had 643 and 607. The average of every other country in the world was 500. By 2015, they did the same ranking across, this time around, 71 nations. Singapore retained their position as the #1. So telling you that the quality of education that a kid in Singapore is receiving in terms of sciences and in terms of mathematics is far advanced than most nations of the world. Now, compare that to Africa. There's an examination called International Olympiad. If you want to know nations that are serious with education, go and find out the performance of their team of secondary school Olympiad students. You can Google that and you see how far. Recently, I think sometime last year, I Googled the result of Africans, Nigeria in particular, and I saw that a lot of Nigerian students that participated in that Olympiad at the mathematics level were having 0 in international. These are our best students in International Mathematics Olympiad. So we think we are getting education. We are trying, we've actually gone a long way compared to what we were like some years ago, but we're still far away from the quality of education that can drive a functional knowledge-based economy. Now, these are the minds that will drive your industries. These are the minds that will drive your digital economies. These are the minds that will draft out, construct, and design the things that would produce these industries that will convert raw materials into finished products, even the business models that will drive these things. So you see, a government that sees education as something serious and a national investment, it's only a matter of time before that country starts growing at a rapid rate. Now, the second thing I want to talk about that influences the growth of a knowledge-based economy is political stability. Now, political stability is actually a direct product of the government handing off production. A country where the government owns everything, a country where the government interferes with production and the market regulation, and the market environment, not regulation. Go and check all around the world. They are the most unstable and volatile nations on earth currently in the 21st century. They are always fighting. They are always struggling for power. They are always killing people. Go and check almost all productive nations, all stable economies in the world. You will see that the government, they have just one function, regulation. I kind of packing up all these things into one function: regulation, taxation, and maybe infrastructures to an extent. But the government is never involved in the means of production. The same thing applies to the US. The reason why the economy of America is the way it is that the federal government, they have nothing to do with production in America. The production is driven by the people. The state governments have nothing to do with production. The government focuses on laws. Now, the third very important thing I want to talk about that drives a knowledge-based economy is what is known as meritocracy. You see, nothing kills a nation like favoritism or tribalism. Any country that will thrive economically by the people must be a country that makes merit the foundation of virtually everything. Now, this encourages healthy competition among citizens. Most times we think we are helping Nigeria by putting our tribal men everywhere, but we are actually not. We are destroying the nation. I will also cite Singapore as an example. During that same period of Lee Kuan Yew, what they call the PPA party, the PAP party, they were the ones that laid the foundation, and they have differences like we have in Nigeria. I don't think there's any country in the world without differences. They were the ones that laid the foundation for meritocracy that is actually still the standing foundation of Singapore. Everything is strictly by merit, no matter where you are, where you come from, promotion in government offices, everything, admission to universities. So, do you know what that does? If you're a citizen of Singapore, you know you must be the best you can be to make any slight progress in Singapore. So you see their citizens competing in a healthy way amongst themselves to grow. Everyone has to bring out his best to make progress. In the academic institutions, admission, everything. I'm not surprised that their kids are performing that much in education. And they also have a policy called the government actively attempts to keep their best. In fact, their government agencies is such that the pay, they have a different body that regulates the payment of government workers, and they try to match it with private sectors so they can compel their best brains to work for the government in enacting laws and policies that control the nation. So they try to make it appealing enough for their best brains to choose the government sector, not just the industry. So there's a shared quota. It's not like a system where everybody is coming out from university and thinking that the industry is actually where I'm going to earn the most. These people sat down and planned this thing, and it's been working for them to date. So I spoke about education. I spoke about, I elaborated on what I mean by education. Look, I was having a discussion with a friend on Sunday, and we came to this conclusion. You see, music is wonderful. Sports is wonderful. Having a lot of celebrities, it's amazing. But no economy is built by music. There is no economy built by sports. If economies are built by sports, Brazil will be one of the richest nations in the world because of their exploits in football. And their exploits in football didn't start today. But Brazilian economy is where it is. And if you notice in Nigeria, because of the minimal investment in education, there is this growing consciousness amongst the youths in Nigeria that education has no value. Everybody wants to be a celebrity in music. Everybody wants to be a celebrity in sports. But I'll tell you something. If that mindset continues growing, we are making no headway as a nation. Those things don't build economies. People who are heavily invested in sciences and business education are actually the people that build the economies. And it is the duty of the government to encourage these things by investment. So what does competition do in an economy like that? Competition encourages efficiency. How do I mean by that? If you have a system where you have two persons producing chairs, the one I used to sit and the one you used to sit, and we have a market that is free and open and is totally driven by the people and market factors, look at what will happen if we are producing the same kind of seat that has the density is the same thing, the price tag is the same thing, and I need to make more profit. I'm left with few options. It's either I research better and find another material that can give me the same quality of seats with a less dense material, meaning that I can have the same quality, but it's lighter. People can sit, you can present the same seats that gives you the same quality, the same comfort, but with a much lighter material, which will be much more appealing to the people. How is this possible? These are the things that drive R&D. Competition, healthy competition between citizens in the marketplace. And that's why in a nation like America, you see in Nigeria, the government is still sponsoring, is still trying to put in so much in universities. But in America, because they succeeded in earlier than this, much more earlier than this, the US government system succeeded in creating an atmosphere where the economy is driven by the people. The competition has gotten to a point where industries actually drive research. So if I want a seat that is lighter and has the same quality, it means I need a different material that has those properties, so I can make more profit and outwit my competitors. So what will I do? If I'm owning a firm, I will go to the university, pay professors to gather students that would invest their time and intelligence into research for a better material. And that's actually how research is driven in the United States. Most universities, their research outputs are sponsored by the industry because of competition. So you go to many top universities, Facebook have their labs, Microsoft have their professors that they sponsor heavily to use students to do research works that would help them outwit their competitors. A lot of improvements you see in semiconductor industries and so many areas came out of the universities sponsored by the industries. But we don't have that in many parts of Africa, largely because of government influence in the marketplace. Having said that, I wish to give us more details on what happened in Nigeria. First of all, from the research I did, Nigeria is ranked 151 out of, in terms of human capital development by United Nations Development Index. As of 2004, Nigeria was ranked 151 out of all other companies. And this also applies to non-energy infrastructures. We have inadequate non-energy. Our only investment is in oil and gas. Now, Nigeria ranks 6th in worldwide farm outputs. Now, it will surprise you to note this. Nigeria ranks 6th in worldwide farm outputs. So we actually farm. We do a lot agriculture-wise. Why are we still where we are? I will tell you why. The reason is because most of our agricultural outputs they are all based on raw materials. So we plant all these things, we harvest them, and we sell the raw materials without ever converting them into finished products. And I have some details. I think currently in the world, Nigeria they are leading in cassava production. We have cocoa. We have tomatoes. Let me give you another example. The northern part of Nigeria, they produce tomatoes. They export those things. And Nigeria, these other nations take our exports as raw materials and convert those exports to finished products. And then Nigeria would go ahead and buy those things back as importations. So Nigeria imports tomato paste. Now, it might look normal to you, but let me tell you this: a basket of tomato, if Nigeria sells a basket of tomato at, I don't have it offered, but I'm giving you an estimation. If Nigeria sells a basket of tomato at $5, that basket of tomato would be used to produce a tomato paste that might be worth over $500 or $1,000. And Nigeria will spend more in buying those tomato paste. So the gap between the raw material and the finished product is where these nations that are fully invested in knowledge-based economies thrive. So because of the level of education they have, they are able to build industries, they have the human capital, they have the knowledge base to convert these things into finished products. Things they purchased for nothing as raw materials, they convert them into finished products and sell out with so much more profits. So their GDPs keep increasing and are stable. Why the nations that have the raw materials that refuse to advance in education, which directly produces advancement in technology, They will keep dwelling on raw materials and will keep going down, getting poorer and poorer every day. So, and another example, you ask yourself, what happened to Nigerian mining industry? It's on record that what killed the mining industry in Nigeria is actually oil and gas. After the discovery of oil and gas, Nigerian government forgot about everything mining. So in Nigeria, we have tin, we have columbite. In fact, I love the way Google put it. So that Nigeria, let me get, there's an import that Nigeria, there's something Nigeria imports that is actually laughable. I think by now most of us know that we import toothpick too. Why we have wood in Nigeria, we import toothpick. The difference between wood and toothpick is education, which directly produces industries. And the profits in conversion from wood to toothpick, that is actually where the profit lies. But we have sufficient woods in Nigeria. And this same thing that is plaguing Nigeria is actually exactly the same thing plaguing Brazil and so many other third world nations that are fighting for governance and raw materials and killing themselves. Give me a second. I'm trying to pick out a major statistics for Nigeria. I think of recent, many of us might not know, but Ebonyi State, we have a very huge deposit of limestone in Ebonyi State, and it's lying there dormant. Nobody is doing anything with the limestone. And for years, Nigeria was importing cement, which is very laughable, but it tells you something about the culture of the people. If you have time, research about Niger cement industry. It was built by the whites, the British colonial masters. It's a cement industry that, when optimized, can actually supply the cement need of Nigeria as a whole. But it's been down since 2000. That's 20 years now. Nothing is happening. Nigeria is comfortably importing cement from outside. And I'm not surprised when you look at the attention we pay to education as a nation. You wouldn't be surprised that these things happen. I'm not surprised as an individual. That is what you get directly. It's a nation that does not value the education of their people. So in a nation where the government is involved in production, there will always be political instability. When government lifts their hands from production, efficiency is improved. Number one, the fight for governance amongst tribes and regions will be drastically reduced. When the people control the means of production, the economy of the nation thrives. They grow at a very fast rate. And that's exactly what we need in Africa, really. We need to get to a point. We are coming up to a new generation. I keep saying it, some persons that you know today are going to be some of the leaders of tomorrow. That's a fact. So we need to understand that you don't need crude oil for your economy to thrive. All you need to do is to invest in your people. If you invest in your people and create a conducive environment, your people will develop things that would cause the economy to thrive on its own, and it will be more stable. So it's a basic understanding. When you talk about Nigeria now, to an average Nigerian, the first thing they tell you is oil, natural resources, this and that. You think you cannot survive without these things. So quickly, let me give you more details on a nation like Singapore, the industries that are driving the economy of Singapore. Let me give you some details on those industries that are driving Singapore. And Belgium also. So as of 2017, Singapore was ranked as the world's second most open economy and the most pro-business regime in the world. The government of Singapore, they have only one function: regulation, taxation, and creating of a conducive environment for business. They don't have any other function more than that. The people drive the economy. Now, the factors, the economic, the parts of the economy that drive their system the most are these. You have the electronics manufacturing industry, the machinery industries, the financial services, the tourism, and Singapore actually has the world's busiest cargo seaport, sorry. So the world's busiest cargo seaport is in Singapore. So look at what I listed here. Electronics manufacturing, machineries. Now, electronics and machineries, they are basically two industries that specialize in converting raw materials to finished products. So when you talk about electronics, with the understanding I have now, when I hear electronics, what comes to my mind is moving from sand to computers, because that's basically what it is. The ICs and everything, moving from sand and some of these natural tin, some of these mineral resources that African nations give away as raw materials, moving from there to computers. That's what electronics is about. And these economies thrive on stuff like that. Machineries, we have tin, we have so many things in Nigeria. We have a Abeokuta steel industry. What is it doing? Nothing. We are mining crude oil. And the Abeokuta steel industry is there lying dormant. So you see, when as a nation we shift our attention away from nature, all these resources, when we shift our attention to the people, what will happen? We will develop a people with such a wealthy mindset that would directly translate into knowledge that is good enough to transform many of these natural resources to finished products. And it will directly lead to creation of jobs. We are talking about creation of jobs. Nigerian government cannot create jobs. It is not the duty of the government primarily to create jobs. No matter how much we try, even if the value of crude goes up. Now, do you know that the toothpick industry alone can employ thousands of Nigerians? If we have a system that can transform wood into toothpick, that alone can lead to the growth of so many industries that can employ thousands of Nigerians. If we have a system that encourages people to build industries that can transform tomatoes to tomato paste, the gap between raw tomatoes from the farm and tomato paste is you have thousands of employments there. If we have a system that can transform potatoes from the farm to mashed potatoes, the gap between potatoes and mashed potatoes, that is where employment is. And that is where research is. And that is where the growth of our institutions are. If you want our institutions to grow, that gap between raw materials and finished products, if we find a way of making that thrive, our institutions will grow, because for that to thrive, you need research. Education will grow. Investment in education will increase. Employment will increase. But these are not things that would be primarily driven by the government. There is no place in the world the government is driving such things and they have a stable system. There is not one place in the world like that. So now, talking about financial services, do you know that Singapore, for example, they are so educated business-wise, they are so educated that they have a lot of firms that are solely based on, I think they have about 200 banks, professional, high-profile banks, and then so many other finance services that are exported to other countries. And you know what all these things mean in terms of profit. places like just the way they export PwC and PwC and KPMG and Deloitte to us in Nigeria. You might not know, but whatever profits they are making in Nigeria, a good chunk of it is going back to their home government. So there are countries that developed their business education, developed people that were able to build successful financial institutions that are being looked upon as experts, and they exported these things beyond the shores of their country. And in turn, those nations are making profits out of it. They are making profits from people like Nigeria through PwC and KPMG. Then you ask yourself, why can't we develop our people to a point where we can build such systems for Africa at least? It boils down to the same thing: education and political stability. Look at transportation. Do you know that there are countries that thrive on transportation? In Europe, for example, the transportation base of Europe, if I'm correct, I think it's Amsterdam, Netherlands. Transportation alone, it's a service-based industry. There are nations that the economy is built on transportation. What's the transportation system in Nigeria like? After how many years? But there's no incentive. There's no reason why the people should develop those things. Why should they develop it? Where the government is getting crude oil and collecting money and distributing it to everybody and fighting over crude oil. When the government lifts their hands from the direct development of the economy and instead invest on the people and allow the people develop these things, we will have more flourishing and stable economic system. People will think, first of all, and not just thinking, educated minds, because when you invest in education, you will directly produce excellent minds. Let me give you a practical example. Most of us know Iran, right? You know, Iran, they have been under so much economic bans from UN and US. If you follow world politics, you would understand that around all those Arab nations, most of the other Arab nations fear Iran the most. And are entering into collaborations just to contain the threat of Iran. Now ask yourself, Saudi Arabia, they have oil. They have freedom and liberty to export their oil. What's their name? UAE, they have oil. They have freedom and liberty to export their oil. They're doing a lot. Why is it that this country, Iran, that has all this ban on them, why are they have the money? These other guys have the money. Why have they not been able to contain this country? I discovered the reason. Exactly the same thing I'm talking about. A people-influenced economy that invests on the education of their people and meritocracy almost always produces a superior society. I've been privileged to interact with a lot of Iranians, and I will tell you one thing. You might not hear it on the news. Iranians are extremely intelligent. They are extremely intelligent. And why are they extremely intelligent? I have a lot of friends. I was privileged to meet a professor too, from Iran. He's been in US for, I think, over 25 years. I realized that back home, their system thrives on education. Iranian governments don't joke with the education of their people. In fact, education is so competitive in Iran, that to enter university, kids, you have to be the best you can be to enter university. So you go to International Olympiad, go and check the performance of Iranians in International Olympiad. They are almost always at the top. And this professor friend of mine, he told me something. He actually took his family home he raised them in Iran. He said that the focus on education, science-based education, is so much in Iran that his children, the only thing they do is to eat and read. Because if you're not that invested in education, you will be dropped aside. The competition is that stiff. In fact, he made me to understand that they rank, when you leave what we know as secondary school and high school here in US, when you leave high school, they write a national exam. There's nothing like malpractice, and give ranking to all the graduates the whole nation. So you have first position, second position, third position. You know your ranking. If you are 400, you know you are 400. And this will in turn influence your admission to universities. So what does it do? If you are growing up as a child in Iran, you know you must read. You must be knowledgeable. I fear Iranians in mathematics. They are good. And I'm not surprised that it's spilling over in the economy. With all the bans being placed on them, this country is able to produce all the things they're producing, enough for other surrounding countries that have freedom to be afraid of them. So the people always translate into the economy and productivity. And that also talks about meritocracy. It's another nation where they don't joke with merit. So where you have merit, the people are forced to work. In the government sectors, in the industries, you know that for you to be promoted, you must be good. So you see, we have a long way to go. But I want a shift in mentality for the upcoming generation. So when we are talking about the future of Nigeria, I do not want young people that are also thinking about petroleum and crude oil. They give power to the youths, they maintain the production of crude oil, and Nigeria continues with the same structure, business as usual. There is need for a change in mentality in our generation. There is need for an understanding that what we need is not natural resources. What we need is the people. The people are actually our greatest wealth. An investment in the people is the greatest investment in the economy. So if we want Africa to grow, we must take education seriously. And the governments in Africa should learn to hands off production and let the people drive production. It will lead to political stability in Africa. Nothing leads to political stability like government handing off production. Government ownership of things leads to instability anywhere in the world, virtually anywhere. And it's sad that African nations have refused to learn one of these basic things. This is one of the most basic things in building a stable economy. Government's hands in production leads to instability all over the world. Wherever you find government hands in production and means of production, there is instability. In every stable economy in the world, the governments have their hands off production. And they're focused on laws, they're focused on taxation, they're focused on creating a level playing ground for people to thrive. So when we are talking about the next generation of governance, I want a change of mentality. That's why, like you guys say, this is a series. So it's not enough to just come and talk about way forward, get your PVC, vote. When you vote and vote a young person with exactly the same mentality that says that petroleum is the greatest wealth in Nigeria, you will have exactly the same thing, nothing will change. So there is need for education of our people. There is need for a change of mindset, not just for Nigeria, but for Africa as a whole. We have so much in Africa. We need to translate into a service-based economy and an economy that converts raw materials into finished product. And that conversion from raw materials to finished product takes education and technology. Only educated minds can independently move from raw materials to finished products. Only educated minds, only an educated society can independently move from raw materials to a finished product. And Africa has not been able to do that. I have so many other details here, but time is against me. I think I will stop at this stage. I wanted to talk about Belgium, what is happening in Belgium, a tiny country like Belgium, the kind of stability they enjoy. We're next to nothing in terms of natural resources. And look at the industries that drive the economy of Belgium. You will see exactly the same pattern with places like Singapore. You will see exactly the same pattern in governance. And you ask yourself, why is it that these nations have nothing, and yet they are wealthier, the standard of living is higher, everything, their political system is more stable than the countries that have natural resources? So the implication of what I'm saying is that Edo State, for example, does not need oil to thrive. That is what I'm saying. All they need is their people to thrive. Anambra State does not need oil to thrive. All they need is their people to thrive. That's all I'm saying. Kaduna State does not need oil. There's this mindset when you talk about Nigeria, oh, these people have oil, what are we going to do? It's a lie. It's a horrible mindset and a falsehood, a laziness-driven false mindset. Ebonyi State, oh, we don't have oil in Ebonyi State, but you have limestone, and it's lying dormant there because you refuse to evolve your people to a point where they would contain the capacity to transform limestone and coal into resources that will benefit Africa. Do you know that there are many nations in the world that the economies are simply based on banking system, the seaports, and they are doing very well? What does Israel have? Go and check. Now, you have many nations that have very little land. Israel is one of the most fruitful nations in terms of agriculture. You can Google what I'm telling you. They are doing so well in agriculture. Israel is on a mountainous lands. They are mountainous sites. So they don't actually have fertile grounds naturally the way Nigeria and Brazil have theirs. Why is Israel doing well in agriculture? Education. Education gave them the capacity to develop technologies, to develop systems that can get the most out of their lands. They have systems that can make on fertile grounds fertile. They have systems that can, through hybrid systems, crop hybridization, and it's called I wouldn't say, let me say DNA hybrids. It's a bit into genetics. You have that capacity to transform anything into whatever you like, but it takes high level of education. Meaning I can have a small piece of land, but with technology, I can increase and optimize the product of that small piece of land. And that's actually the reason why Netherlands does not have much land, but they're the highest suppliers of flowers to the world, and not Brazil. And you know this because in Netherlands, horticultural professors are some of the most respected professors because they're the people that do the research that lead into mass production of those flowers, transforming the flowers into whatever you like. And it's a heavy industry. Yes, genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms. So getting to the point of genetically modified organisms takes technology, it takes knowledge, it takes education, it takes research. These nations that know that they have little invest in the education of their people. That's why they are able to do those things. So even with little, they are producing things that are beyond them and are exporting them to the world. And nations like Brazil and Nigeria that has all the land on earth, we are still importing things. So all I'm trying to say here is what we need is not natural resources. What we need is our people. We need a shift in mentality. And when we successfully develop this shift in mentality, then Africa will move to the next level. We are leaders. Many of us, I keep repeating this, will find ourselves in different leadership positions in some years' time. We need a change of mentality. We need a change of mentality. And with this, I will come to the end of at least today's presentation. I have so much to talk about, but there's a limitation of time. So I can't talk about everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing that. Wow, wow. I've actually written out a whole lot of stuff. And one major thing that I think is still ringing in my head is that what we need in Nigeria is people. People, that is really key. So at this in the absence of that, I'm gonna hand it over to Sir John for the call to action. What is it?
All right. Good evening to everyone again. I want to say a very huge thank you to Wiener for that expose. My notice is practically filled, right? And then what I just want to say is how that we must begin immediately to understand how that a society or a nation is not the place, it's the people. It's the people, for those of us that watch science fiction, there was a time Marvel comical universe, Thor was making a statement and he said something very interesting that's always been with me. He said, Asgard is not a place, Asgard is her people. The moment we understand how that our natural resources are the people natural to us, then it begins to shift our thinking. And what is the primary call to action that I have from my end? It's simple. What becomes your own perspective as a person? He said something that is very striking: meritocracy. Meritocracy is something, he gave us an example the previous week about a certain professor that had this bilateral agreement with a certain country to give equipment and stuff to a certain university in Nigeria. And because of the fact that this person was not from a certain tribe, you see, that was aborted. Now, in our own tiny dealings, how do we see the next person? This is very important. This is very key. And then also it begins to consciously shift how we begin to think about our businesses and invest in our finances. I know even a lot of young people like myself, like other Nigerians out there that have, want to start a business, want to start this, want to start that. And what they think about first is production. All right, and they just stop there at producing raw materials. They don't go on to think of how do I transform soul to soul. All right, the good book tells us something. It says it's a fool that does not roast what it takes in hunting. All right, he hunts it quite all right, but he doesn't roast it, you see. So it's something that we need to begin to consciously imbibe. I have a lot of friends that are into IT. I'm an IT person that are into IT. What are the kind of solutions that we're beginning to think about? What are the solutions that we're beginning to think of? Are we just people that are just thinking of how to just, get by every day? I just want to make quick buck and make some enough money for myself and my family. So a thinking like this would not a thinking now, a session like this, what it should do for you is that it begins to expand your thoughts. And I'll end with this. We can't overemphasize the place of conscious knowledge, conscious learning, and not just learning anything, but learning the things that are valuable, the things that are key, keeping abreast with what the current trends are in the scheme of today. So
Thank you so much, sir, for that call to action. And before we go, I also want to say thank you again to our speaker, Mr. Mina. Thank you so much for sharing the wisdom and this important things that we really need to know. Thank you so much, sir. And also thank you to everyone that called in today. Thank you.